Okay guys, I'm just going to be going over on how to set up and configure Windows Server. So first thing you want to do is go ahead and open up Server Manager. So just do Server Manager. This is going to take a bit to load. You're going to get inside this dashboard here. Give it a moment to load. You're going to select Add Roles and Features. Go here, hit Next. Now, for remote desktop services, if you're not going to be a part of an Active Directory or a domain, you're going to have to use role-based or feature-based installation. Remote desktop service installation is only going to work if you're on a domain, but you can do it from a work group. You just got to do some extra configurations. Go to Server Roles. Make sure you have Remote Desktop Services selected. Go ahead and select Hyper-V because I'll be going over that as well. And web server IIS. So as long as make sure you have all of those three selected, just use the default configs when it prompts you. Go through here. Go ahead and grab multi-point connector. Grab network virtualization. And make sure you grab wireless LAN services as well. That's for Cloudflare if you intend to use that, which I do. Go ahead and hit Next. Let the installation complete and restart your system. Once your system restarts, you're going to go ahead and come back in here, and you're going to have to configure the services. First thing you're going to want to configure is Remote Gateway. So go here, go to Remote Desktop Gateway Manager. Okay, go ahead and select here. Right here, it's going to have some prompts here that's going to tell you to basically configure some things. Go to Policies, Connection Authorization Policy, select Create New Policy, hit Custom, give the policy a name. I always go with something just like default. Go through here, Requirements. You're going to need to fill this out. Hit Add Group. Do Administrators. Add another group. And this is going to be Remote Desktop Users. And there we go. So anybody who's a part of the administrators or remote desktop users can remotely log in. Go ahead and set that up. I recommend setting up a idle timeout I normally do 24 hours. You can kind of leave it at defaults or something. It's really up to you. So 60 times 24. So 1440 from both. And then go ahead and hit OK. That'll create the default CAP. Go through here, go to Resource Authorization Policies. You're going to do something pretty much the same thing. Hit Create New Policy in the right, hit Custom. Go ahead and give it a policy name, default. And description, I usually just go with default RDRAP. Go to User Groups. I recommend just leaving this blank. Actually specify the user group whose members can connect. No, never mind. Go through here, do the same thing. Do administrators, and then do remote desktop users so that those can access it. I like to do it here. Allow users to connect to any network resource. Now, you can define this otherwise, but for just like a default configuration, that's probably fine. For ports, I go with only to port 3389. So if they're trying to access it through a different port, it'll be denied. Go ahead and create that. Then you'll have this configured here, and that'll be good. Next thing you're going to want to do, go to go to your server. You're going to want to right-click it, Go to Properties. Now what you're going to do is want to go ahead and configure everything inside here as well. Go to SSL certificate. We're going to have to either create a self-signed certificate, or you can use Cloudflare or whoever handles your domain to do that. In this example, I'm going to be showing you how to do it through Cloudflare. So go to cloudflare.com. If you don't have a domain, you're going to have to get one to use Cloudflare services. If you wanted a recommendation, I recommend domains.google.com. Go here, create an account if you don't have one. I do, so I can just log in, go to my domains. I'm going to sign in at gmail.com. Go to my domains, and as you can see, I have a domain here. But you can go to get a new domain and just search up whatever domain you want. So I don't know. Yeah, as you can see here, you can pick up domains for pretty cheap, $12 a year. Not a problem. That's more or less what I'm paying for mine. So go ahead and create an account with Cloudflare once you have your domain. WSV.1 at Gmail. Come on. Well, I typed it all in. Apparently, it's just taking its time to actually think about what I just did. Go ahead and enter in the dashboard. Now here, you're not going to have any websites. I've already added mine, but what you'll do is you'll just hit add a website, enter in the domain name. So, I don't know, administratordomains.com. Hit add site. It'll take a second to load. Scroll through here, steps 1 of 3. Scroll down, hit free, continue. Here you go. As you can see, it did not pick up any DNS records. A lot of the times it'll pick up some default records. That's fine. We're just going to leave it blank for now. Yep, add records later. All right, so right here, it wants you to set up the Cloudflare name servers. If you did use Google Domains, go to My Domains. You'll see the domain that you purchased. Go to Manage. Go ahead and go to DNS. Go to Custom Name Servers. As you can see, it is active. But right here is what you'll hit Manage Name Servers, and then this is where you'll type the 2 domains and then hit Save. Now, I'm going to expect that this isn't going to update for you probably for about 15, maybe even 30 minutes, but they say it can take upwards to 24 hours. And then just hit Check Name Servers. And then it'll verify that. Once you have your name servers set up, I'm going to go ahead and delete this. So I'm going to remove site from Cloudflare because that's not a real domain. But once you do that, go in, it'll say great news, it's set up. Go here, go to DNS, and you want to make sure that you have your DNS records added. As you can see here, I do have it configured. What you'll do is you'll just hit add record. If there is nothing here, type in the domain name, so like WSV.1, and then your public IP address. So you can just go to Bing, what is my IP? I know Bing tells you. So your public IP address, it'll just spit it out right there. Make sure that is configured correctly. Go ahead and set it up proxied if you want. If you don't want, if you proxy it, it'll hide your IP address as a VPN network through Cloudflare servers. If you don't proxy it, it'll just be pointing it. So it's just a domain name. call, and it just says this domain is associated with this public IP, and then moves traffic forward without proxying it. Proxying is a bit secure, so that's what I'd recommend. Once you have that all set up, go to SSL TLS. This is where you're going to want to go ahead and configure your security stuff. For SSL TLS, I recommend just using full strict mode. Go ahead and get that configured. Once you have that enabled, go to Origin Server, Origin Certificates. You're going to need to create a certificate. We're going to use my private key and CSR. Now, in order to create this private key, go ahead and launch IIS Manager that you installed through Server Manager. Click on your server. You're going to go to Server Certificate. You're going to create a certificate request. So common name, this will just be your domain name. Organization, you can also just do your domain name. Organizational unit, it doesn't matter. I just go with technology. A locality, just pick something that's, I guess, near you that's like a major city. RSA cryptographic channel. I recommend not going any lower than 2048, but me personally, I go with 4096. It just that added security, and it doesn't have that much more overhead for the encryption algorithm. So technically a lower encryption is less secure, but is faster for processing. This is more secure, but it takes more processing power. And this one right here is probably going to take you like an hour, maybe even 3 hours just to generate that key. So not recommended. This one's pretty much instant. Specify it. You just click here, go to Documents, create a new folder. I normally just do certificates, but this is just going to be test here. And then call it CSR, hit open, it'll create it, hit finish. Okay, so now that just created a certificate request. You can go in there, go to Documents, go to Test, your CSR. Right here is the certificate request. Go back to Cloudflare, where it's right here. Type in, or just paste in the request as your private key CSR. Host names, make sure that I recommend having a wildcard, so wildcard.wsv.1, so that'll cover things like rdp.wsv.1, www.wsv.1, etc., as well as having just the standard wsv.1, or the root domain. Choose how long you want the certificate to be valid for. I just set it for 15 years. You can always come back here and invalidate it if you really want to. And then hit create. This is going to give you the key. So just copy that. Go to your folder that you created. Go to new. Do another document here. Go in, paste it in, save it. And then I recommend just renaming it to csr.pem.ser or for certificate. Delete the text file part. So that way you have an actual security certificate. It doesn't really matter, but once you do that, hit complete certificate request. Go ahead and go to your test certificate. Friendly name, just do your domain again, and then choose personal, and then hit OK. Once you do that, you'll see that your certificate is generated here, right here, so certificate store personal. And once you do that, you're pretty much good to go for the certificate. It's created now. You're going to want to go back to your gateway manager. All right, click on the gateway, go to properties, go to SSL certificate, There, you're just going to hit import certificate. Your Cloudflare certificate should show up. Hit import. If it doesn't show up in this list for whatever reason, you can go here. This one here. Select browse and import certificate. Find the certificate where you put it. Actually, you're only going to be able to do that if it's a PFX. So if you didn't see it in the previous one right here, you're going to have to go back to Certificate Manager for IIS, the server certificates. Go to Export. Hello server, I would like to export a certificate, please. There you go. So click on the certificate, hit export here on the right, export to, and then just call it CSR. And then it'll create a PFX file. You have to type a password in for it to encrypt the file. Once you do that, you can go to Browse and Import Certificate, go to your Documents, go to your certificate, click it, and then hit Open, and that'll import the certificate. That's only if you don't have it configured for that. Go ahead and check the other configurations. So 3394, 443, that's default, local, that's good. SSL bridging, I recommend using SSL bridging and then selecting HTTPS bridging, which terminates SSL requests and initiates new HTTPS requests. And that'll fix any potential issues you may have with that. You'll be good to go on that. Now that'll configure the certificates and everything in Gateway Manager, but you're not done there. What you're going to want to do next, let me close out of some of these windows because it's gotten kind of ridiculous. Because now you want to configure the licensing. So remote gateway licensing. So remote desktop licensing manager. Jump into here. This is where you can then install your licenses. Now, if you're doing it the way I have it, the only valid licenses for RDS is going to be device CALs. If you have user CALs, you're going to have to convert that over to device CALs. Now, if you don't have any licensing at all, sadly, it is not free for said licensing. Go ahead, open up a browser. I have I guess a decent recommendation. It's called Software Kong. Go ahead and go here. So Software Kong, they do sell device CALs, and they sell them relatively inexpensively. We'll do it to USD, so 35 US dollars. Now, from my understanding, they don't necessarily ship to the US per se, but they do ship to the UK. But they send you your software licenses through email address. So I don't know, you could just pick somewhere if you really wanted to. You could just say insert random location in the UK. They'll email you the key. If you choose to do the UK, you're gonna have to pay additional VAT fee, so extra taxes on that. You're also gonna be paying UK taxes, but it is what it is. Grand total, you're probably looking around 40, maybe like 42 US dollars after all taxes and everything and VAT and stuff if you do choose to do it that way. But there you go. Pick up your device CALs. Once you have that, go here, hit install licenses, hit next. What am I looking at? Oh, that's for something different. So can I fix that? Next, I do not want to have to do it through this. So I'm going to have to actually change it. Go to properties. If you run into this issue, connection method, automatic. Okay. You shouldn't have to worry about that. But install licenses. Next, do license pack retail purchase. Hit next. type in your license code, hit add, hit next, and that'll install your licenses. It should show up in here. It should say retail purchase, how many licenses you have and how many are available, how many were issued, etc. So I've only had one device log into the server remotely. So as you can see, it issued a device key. But you have to actually configure that. So even though you've installed the license, it's not actually configured on the server. So you're going to have to do that as well. And you're going to have to use group policy to do that. So type in group, go to edit group policy. Administrative templates, go to Windows components. You're going to want to find where is remote desktop services. Here you go. RD licensing, you don't have to worry about that one. So remote connection, desktop connection. That is, you don't have to worry about that. Desktop session host. It's going to be RD connection broker, licensing. Yeah, so use the specified remote desktop license servers. You're going to want to right click, hit edit or double click it, change it from not configured to enabled, and then set in the local host or a loopback IP address. So that would be 127.0.0.1 or just localhost. Hit OK. That'll configure that. And then you're going to set the remote desktop licensing mode. Right click, edit, hit enabled, and then set it to per device. Again, per user is not going to work. That only works if you have Active Directory domain services configured for your server. All right, hit OK. Once you have that, you're good to go on your licensing configurations. So that'll fix that issue. Now you're going to want to go ahead and configure IIS, or Internet Information Services. Now how you're going to do that is you'll go ahead and just do IIS. Go ahead and launch IIS Manager. Go to your server. Go ahead and check your SSL settings. So if you've set up FTP, go to FTP SSL. Go to, if you don't have a certificate selected, just hit select. It should show up under Cloudflare. Make sure you have it selected. Hit require SSL and then enable 128-bit encryption for SSL connections. I recommend it. It's not necessary. Again, this is more of a security versus convenience kind of thing. I always recommend having the extra security versus having it configured for convenience, if you will. Once you do that, go ahead and check your other SSL settings. So go to your sites. You should have a couple of things listed here. Go to default website, go to SSL settings. Make sure you have that set to require SSL as well. If you have that, you can check your bindings too. So HTTPS port 443, hit edit. Make sure you have the correct SSL certificate set for this as well, or you're going to run into an SSL certificate error when people try to browse the address. Go to HSTS. I recommend having this enabled and then redirecting all HTTP traffic to HTTPS. Once you do that, I also recommend setting up limits in bandwidth usage and number of connections. So I like to limit the number of connections to 4, and then setting up the bandwidth usage. Let me actually get a calculator for that so I can configure that, because this is in bytes. So 8 bits equal 1 byte. So times how much do I want? So 1 megabyte. 8 megs. Yeah, so you can do that. 8 megabyte connection should be enough. Maybe I want to do 1024. How much do I want? Yeah, that's fine. 10 megabyte connection. I don't actually have the bandwidth for that, to be terribly honest. If someone wants to pull 10 megabytes, I'm pretty much just out of bandwidth. But the number of connections is basically how many continuous downloads they can have. So if you think about it, if you have this configured for number of connections to 4, they can do 4 times this. But each one of those connections being made is capped at this bandwidth. So I mean, like, configure that how you want, but that's fine on my end. 60 timeout. I'm going to configure that differently because I don't want it to count timeout after 2 minutes. So we'll do. Do I do an hour? We'll do an hour. That's actually probably too much. Nope, I lied. I'm going to leave it at 120. Okay, but so once you have that configured, you're good. You're going to go ahead and want to verify that that is configured properly. So just go to Edge and then try to browse to your website, WSV.1. As you can see here, I am not getting a certificate error. You can go here, make sure that it is configured, a connection is secure, and then give you your certificate. As I'm using Google, it shows up as Google Trust Services LLC, and everything is good. 10 out of 10. So that's configured. We don't have to worry about that. Okay, so that covers IIS, that covers RDP/RDS. I think that's pretty much everything. I can't think of anything else. Let me see what else we have going on. Let me just double check if I need to go anything. Oh, there's Hyper-V, but Hyper-V is pretty straightforward. It's either do you have it installed or do you not. Yeah. Now, I guess as a general rule for Hyper-V, if you do want to go ahead and configure this, go to Hyper-V settings, default location. I always recommend having the default locations on something that's not your internal drive that your OS is running on, because if you have multiple OSs running on one drive, you're gonna make your life hurt ever so slightly. So I just recommend pointing this to a external drive of sorts, or if you have another drive in your system that Windows isn't running, put it there. Allow virtual expand NUMA nodes, that's fine. That's also all fine. Cool. Hyper-V settings, that's what I was looking at. Virtual switch manager. I recommend creating a switch for both internal and external, or external and private networks and everything. So if you don't have a switch here for external, hit create virtual switch. Tell it which NIC that you're going to be using. You're going to want to make sure this NIC has internet connection, because that's how the virtual machine is going to obtain its internet connectivity. So go ahead and select one. I think it's going to be, yes, it's this one that has it. I also recommend enabling single root IO virtualization, or SRIOV, if it's supported by your computer. If it's not, then that's just not going to be something that you can select. Make sure it's an external network, and then give it a name. So this, I would say, RNDC, I guess. It honestly doesn't matter. External NIC. Something like that. Hit apply. and then you're going to be good on that for having internet connectivity. And then go ahead and create another virtual switch for private as well. And then, this can be whatever you want. So just private NIC, and then hit apply and then save that. I'm going to go ahead and delete this one. Delete. And if you create a new virtual machine, I'll just ask you some basic information, give it a name. I always recommend giving it just like a name so that you know what it's running. So like Win Server 2022, and then I use V01, and then the V just stands for virtual machine. So anything newer or Windows 8 or newer, use generation 2. If it's something older than, if it's Windows 7 or older, use generation 1. It's based off of just UEFI support and such. I'll go and hit next, assign memory. I always recommend doing at least 4 gigs of RAM, but depends on what necessarily you're trying to do. Connection, go ahead and select a NIC. Select an external NIC if that's what you're wanting to do here. Create a virtual hard disk. Depends on what you're trying to do. So if it's going to be like a full OS build, then you should have an idea of what you're going to be using. Now, my current system is using like 16 gigs, I think. Yeah, like 16 gigs is all you really need if it's going to be a base install without a lot of external applications and stuff. I'd say if you're doing like Windows 7 Ultimate or something and you're installing all the language packs and everything, you're probably looking at like 256 gigs to be safe on that without anything else. Just because those language packs can be absolutely massive. But, you set that up. Installation from a bootable image. So if you have an ISO, just grab that. Or you can, if you have like an external flash drive with a bunch of ISOs on it, that's fantastic as well. Just go through and you can just mount those ISOs and then install. I guess I'll do this just for an example. If that's the case, I'm going to do this next. Finish. Okay. What did it give me an arrow on? I don't know. Is that what it was a problem with? Failed to create, virtual system failed to create. Okay, well, if you encounter this error, it's probably because the file name is, because there's probably one that already exists with that name, because I did that. So you just delete it, and then that'll fix that error. Thought maybe it was complaining about capacity, but that's not what it was. Finish. There it goes. It'll create that disk now. There you go. And then you right-click it, hit Start, right-click it again, and then hit Connect. Well, now I'm just looking at a black screen, so I'm not sure. I'm going to hit Control Delete, force it to restart. There we go. And then it's going to load setup. And there you go. You have Hyper-V running. You have IIS running. And you have remote desktop services configured. And you're good to go. I can't imagine anything else that you may really want to be looking into to do that. Now, if you need help actually knowing how to use any of that, I'm not the... Maybe I'll make some other videos in the future on that. But this is my new take to replace my like hour-long video. So, peace out, guys. Wish you luck.